The wind howled through the barren, snow-covered plains, slicing through the thin fabric of Emma's coat as if it were paper. Her fingers were numb, her face raw from the relentless bite of winter. She had thought this journey across the frontier would be a simple ride, just a few days to reach the next town. But the wilderness had other plans. The horses had thrown her from her saddle after sliding on the icy ground, leaving her alone in the blinding white, with nothing but the cold and the echo of her own desperate breaths. By the first night she had realized just how unprepared she was. She dug herself a shallow trench in the snow, trying to shield herself from the merciless wind. Her mind raced with survival strategies. Ration her small bag of provisions. Keep moving to avoid freezing to death. Find any shelter, anything. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the occasional flicker of moonlight on the snow, making the terrain both beautiful and deadly. On the second day, hunger gnawed at her stomach, but more terrifying was the isolation. Every sound, every creak of the ice felt like it could be the end. She stumbled through the snow, her boots soaked and frozen, leaving a trail of footprints behind her that she doubted anyone would ever follow. She tried to recall survival lessons from the small handbook her father had given her, but the lessons seemed meaningless against the raw, unyielding frontier. She whispered to herself over and over, "I have to survive. I have to survive." By the night of the third day, Emma's hope was fading. She had tried to keep her fire alive with damp wood, but it sputtered and died. Her fingers were nearly useless, her body trembling uncontrollably. She lay down, hugging herself, whispering desperate prayers into the empty wind. It was then that she thought she saw a shadow on the horizon, a vague silhouette moving against the endless white. She squinted through the snow and the blinding wind, trying to focus. Could it be? Another traveler? Or perhaps a rider from one of the distant frontier towns? She tried to stand, but her legs refused to cooperate. If it's just a shadow, it's the end, she thought. She forced herself to lift her hand and wave a piece of cloth she had torn from her coat, hoping against hope. The shadow drew closer, and then she heard it, the distinct, rhythmic pounding of hooves on snow. Her heart leapt. She pushed herself to a sitting position, shivering violently, trying to make herself visible. The rider emerged from the white blur, a lone figure on a rugged horse, cloaked and hooded, moving with the confidence of someone who had survived this wilderness many times before. He stopped a few yards away, letting his horse paw the snow impatiently. His eyes, piercing and steady, locked onto hers. "You're lucky to be alive," he said in a voice that carried over the wind, low and certain. "Not many last 3 days out here." Emma's lips trembled, but she managed to nod, tears freezing on her cheeks. I didn't think anyone would find me." "Luck has little to do with it," he replied. "It's the will to survive, and you've got plenty of that." He dismounted, moving carefully toward her, tossing a small pack onto the snow. "Here, warmth, food. You won't last another hour without it." As she grabbed the pack, her hands barely able to hold it, he lifted her carefully onto the horse behind him. The warmth of his coat against her freezing body was a small, fragile comfort, but it reminded her that she was not yet lost. The horse began to move, cautiously at first, then with more speed, as the shadowy outline of a cabin appeared in the distance. The ride was grueling, the cold still gnawing, but Emma felt a spark of life returning. The stranger glanced back at her once, a hint of a smile breaking through his stoic demeanor. "You're stronger than you think," he said. "The frontier breaks some, but it tempers others." They reached the cabin as the last light of the sun faded behind the jagged horizon. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth and life. Inside, the fire roared, and Emma finally allowed herself to breathe, to feel the life slowly returning to her frozen limbs. He handed her a cup of steaming tea, and she wrapped her fingers around it, savoring the heat. "You've been out there 3 days alone," he said softly. "And yet here you are, alive. That counts for something in this world." She looked at him, a mix of gratitude, awe, and lingering fear in her eyes. Who are you?" she asked. "Just someone who knows the land," he said with a small shrug. "And someone who believes in second chances." The storm raged outside, But inside, the cabin was a haven, a fragile bubble of warmth and safety. Emma realized that survival wasn't just about fighting the cold or hunger. It was about finding the courage to keep moving when every part of you wanted to give up. And sometimes it was about the kindness of a stranger who could turn the wilderness from a place of death into a place of hope. As night fell fully, Emma felt sleep finally take her, the terror of the past 3 days melting away into dreams. She knew the frontier was merciless, but she had learned something essential. Even in the most frozen, desolate corners of the world, human resilience and unexpected courage could prevail. And sometimes, just sometimes, the right person would ride in at the right moment to save a life. When she awoke the next morning, the snow outside had softened under the first touch of sunlight. She looked at him, and for the first time since her ordeal began, she smiled genuinely. "Thank you," she whispered. He tipped his hat, the kind of gesture that seemed timeless in the rugged, Wild West. "Just make sure you remember what you learned out there," he said. "The frontier is harsh, but it doesn't forget those who survive." Emma nodded, feeling a strength she hadn't known she possessed. She stepped outside, the snow crunching beneath her boots, the horizon stretching wide and wild before her. For the first time, she felt truly alive, ready to face whatever the frontier had left to throw her way, knowing that she could survive and that help could come when least expected. And in that moment, alone no longer felt like hopelessness. It felt like the beginning of a new story, one that she would live fiercely, bravely, and without fear. The frozen frontier had tested her, and she had endured. 3 days alone had changed her forever, but she had come out stronger. And somewhere on that endless snowy horizon, a lone rider had proven that hope could arrive even in the harshest winters. The frontier was still wild, the storm still raged in places unseen. But Emma had survived, and she would never forget that the human spirit could shine, even in the coldest, most unforgiving corners of the world. Her story had ended that night, but her journey, her real journey, was only beginning.